If you had walked into the Temple of Apollo at Delphi more than 2,000 years ago, you might think you were stepping into heaven itself. White marble walls gleamed in the sunlight. Golden statues of the gods sparkled in the courtyard. The air was filled with the sweet smoke of burning incense. From the outside, it looked holy, pure, untouchable, but looks can lie. And behind those walls, hidden beneath the songs of the priests and the shameless smiles of the visitors, lived a secret so heavy and so dangerous that the girls of Delphi carried it to their graves. This is the story of those girls. Callista was only 15 the day her village gave her up. The men from Delphi had come riding in with their robes and scrolls, eyes searching the crowd like hunters picking livestock. They didn't ask. They chose. And just like that, Callista's mother's arms were empty, and she found herself dragged toward a life no one dared to speak of. Her neighbors whispered in awe, as if she had been chosen for greatness. "The girl will serve Apollo himself," they said. But Callista wasn't fooled. Her stomach twisted with fear. She had heard things, rumors carried by travelers, stories told in fits of laughter that ended in silence too sharp to be funny. The road to Delphi twisted up the mountain. Behind her, her home grew smaller and smaller until it was nothing more than smoke curling from a chimney. Beside her, the priest who guided the donkey cart kept smiling, but the smile never reached his eyes. "Many envy you," he told her in a smooth voice. "To be chosen is an honor," Callista swallowed. She didn't answer. She felt anything but honored. At night, when they stopped to rest under the stars, she asked softly, "What will happen when I get there?" The priest only chuckled and pulled his cloak tighter. "You'll see soon enough, child. The temple keeps its secrets." That was the first time she heard those words. It would not be the last. By the third day, Delphi appeared, carved into the side of the mountain like a jewel. Stone stairways climbed higher and higher until they reached the great temple itself. Tourists, merchants, and kings crowded the pathways. Everyone wanted to hear the voice of the oracle. And somewhere inside that temple, Callista knew her life would change forever. The smell hit Callista before the doors even closed, a heavy mix of smoke, herbs, and something sweet she couldn't name. Inside the great temple of Apollo, everything was gold and shadow at once. Tall, white columns stretched above her. The roof caught every echo of sandals on stone. For a moment, she forgot to breathe. Here was the place she had only heard of in hushed whispers, the navel of the world. Her grandmother once told her that long ago, 2 eagles had flown from opposite ends of the earth, and where they met, right here, was Delphi. To mark the spot, the priests kept a strange stone, the omphalos, carved with patterns like a net. And there it was, standing in front of her now, wrapped in wool. A lump of rock, but more than rock. Men bowed their heads as they passed it. Some cried. One elderly traveler fell to his knees and pressed his face to the floor. Callista shivered. She had left her home, her mother, her freedom, but she had stepped into a place pulsing with power. Behind her, the priest Damon clicked his tongue impatiently. "Move along, girl. Don't stare. You'll have plenty of time for staring soon." She didn't like his voice. Too smooth. Too certain. They led her down a darker corridor where sunlight did not reach. Oil lamps flickered on the walls, their flames bending in the mountain's draft. At the end stood a wooden door carved with symbols of laurel leaves and lyres. Damon pushed it open. Inside, voices. High, girlish voices. Callista froze in the doorway. A group of girls, her age or younger, sat cross-legged on the floor, dressed in plain white chitons. Their hair was braided simply, no ribbons, no jewelry. They looked up at her as one, and she felt caught like a rabbit in a hunter's trap. One girl with a scar on her chin broke the silence. "Another one?" she said flatly. The others giggled, then went quiet when a taller figure stepped forward. This girl was older, maybe 17, with restless eyes that glowed like firelight even in the dim room. "I'm Lyra," she said. Her voice was soft, but carried weight. "What's your name?" "Callista," she whispered. Lyra smirked, though not unkindly. "Don't be afraid. You won't be the last to arrive. They always find new ones." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "But I'll warn you, everything they told you outside about honor, service, and Apollo's blessing. Lies, all of it." Callista blinked. Her pulse quickened. She wanted to ask, "What do you mean?" But before she could, the door creaked open again. This time, everyone bowed their heads. The figure who entered was draped in layers of purple silk, her hair covered with a golden crown of leaves. She moved slowly, each step deliberate, as though the ground were lucky to be touched by her feet. Her face was pale, her lips thin, her eyes distant. The girls whispered a single word: Pythia. Callista's throat went dry. This was her first sight of the oracle of Apollo, the voice of the god himself. The Pythia ignored them, passing like a ghost in a dream. Two priests held her arms to guide her down the hall, toward the sacred chamber where no commoner, no slave, no girl could follow. But Lyra leaned close again, her whisper hot against Callista's ear. "They say she speaks for Apollo, but I have seen her up close. And sometimes, she does not speak like a god." Lyra's smile vanished, quick as a lightning strike. "Sometimes she screams like a woman trapped." Callista's skin prickled. For the first time since she left her home, true fear rose in her chest. Fear not of gods, but of men. That night, Callista lay on a woven mat in the girls' quarters, staring up at the wooden ceiling beams. Outside, crickets chirped, and somewhere in the distance, the baying of dogs echoed through the valley. The walls were thin, barely cutting out the chill of the mountain. She couldn't sleep. Lyra's words gnawed at her. Sometimes she screams like a woman trapped. Finally, Callista turned her head toward Lyra, who lay only a few feet away, her eyes glinting in the dim glow of a dying oil lamp. "Lyra," she whispered softly, "what did you mean? Why would she scream?" For a moment, Lyra said nothing. She rolled over onto her side, her cheek resting on her folded arm. When she finally spoke, it was softer than before, like a secret carried on a breeze. "This place isn't like the stories, Callista. The god doesn't whisper down from the skies. The priests control the oracle. They feed her herbs, make her breathe in the fumes from the crack in the earth." "Apollo's words?" She snorted. "Those are just the mutterings of a woman half drugged out of her mind." "Why?" Callista asked, wide-eyed. "Because power lives here," Lyra said sharply, then lowered her voice again. "Think, kings, generals, city-states, they all come crawling to Delphi for answers. If the god says, attack tomorrow, they attack tomorrow. If the god says, do nothing, they wait. The priests decide the words, but everyone pretends it's Apollo. That's how they keep every man in Greece dancing on strings." Callista's stomach twisted. She wanted to argue, to say it couldn't be true. But the gleam in Lyra's eyes told her she believed every word. "And the girls?" Callista whispered. "Why us?" Lyra rolled onto her back again, staring at the ceiling. "Because they need us for the rites. Girls are easier to control, easier to silence." The words sat heavy in Callista's chest. Before she could say more, the doors creaked open and two priests stepped inside. One carried a bundle of laurel branches, the other a jug of wine. The fire from their torches painted long shadows across the walls. "It's time," one priest said flatly. The girls rose automatically, wrapping their thin shawls tighter against the chill. One by one they were led down the corridor, barefoot, past the main temple chamber and into a side hall that smelled rich and smoky. Callista's pulse raced. She had never seen so many flames in one place. Braziers burned along every wall, casting wild orange light on the polished stone floor. A statue of Apollo loomed over them, his marble face calm and perfect, but his stone eyes cold. The priests made the girls kneel. Laurel leaves brushed over their heads, and water was sprinkled across their faces. The chanting began, low and rhythmic. "Pure hands, pure lips, pure hearts," one priest intoned. "These girls serve the god in silence." Callista shivered as the drops slid down her cheeks. She wanted to pray for comfort, but the words stuck in her throat. When the ritual ended, the girls shuffled back to their chamber. Lyra brushed past Callista, her jaw tight. "That," Lyra whispered harshly, "is only the beginning." The next morning, Callista was sent to sweep the temple steps. From her spot on the stairs, she saw crowds already gathering, merchants in colorful robes, farmers clutching small offerings of honey cakes, even soldiers with polished shields strapped to their backs. All of them carried the same expression, hope burning in their eyes. They came for answers, for prophecy, for salvation. A trumpet sounded. The people hushed as two priests led the oracle into view. The Pythia looked strange in the daylight. Her skin was pale, stretched tight. Her lips trembled, though no words came. She was seated on a golden chair and carried toward the temple like a fragile idol. The crowd parted, bowing, whispering in awe. The voice of Apollo. Callista clenched her broom tighter. She remembered Lyra's words half-drugged out of her mind. But the people here didn't see a woman, broken by fumes and herbs. They saw a goddess in flesh. The oracle was carried inside. The doors closed. Silence reigned for a beat, before the chanting began again within. Callista pressed her lips together. Something stirred inside her chest. Was it fear? Anger? She couldn't tell. But she knew this Delphi was not what she had been told. And she wasn't sure she wanted to know what the secret rites were, or why Lyra's eyes burned like anger when she mentioned girls being silenced. That night, as the girls gathered again to sleep, Callista lay awake once more. But this time, she wasn't alone. A faint sound drifted through the walls, a muffled cry. Weak, trembling. Not from their chamber, but deeper in the temple. Her blood ran cold. She turned toward Lyra, who stared back at her in the dark, eyes wide open. "You heard it too," Lyra whispered. Callista nodded, heart hammering. Lyra sat up slowly. "Those," she said grimly, "are the forgotten ones. The ones who disappeared. The lost girls?" Callista asked, her voice shaking. Lyra's silence was answer enough. Sleep would not come. Callista lay stiff on her mat, heart racing in the quiet room. Each shallow breath seemed too loud, every flutter of her pulse echoed in her ears. Around her, the other girls had slipped into uneasy sleep, twitching, turning, murmuring. But Lyra remained awake, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "Tonight we go," Lyra whispered so low, it was almost the wind. Callista's breath caught. "Go where?" Lyra's head tilted toward the far corner, where shadows swallowed the wall. "There's a passage. I've been there before. It leads down under the temple." Fear twisted in Callista's stomach. "But why? What if—" Lyra leaned close, her face inches away. "Don't you want to know what they hide from us?" Her words had the sharp certainty of a knife pressed against skin. "Don't you want to know the truth about the crying?" Callista swallowed hard, her body torn between rising terror and unbearable curiosity. If she stayed, she would never know. But if she followed, there might be no return. Lyra was already on her feet, moving silently across the stone floor. Callista forced herself to follow, her bare feet cold against the slabs. They crept past the rows of sleepers and slipped into the shadows by the door. Lyra produced a small dagger from beneath her thin shawl, stolen, perhaps from a careless guard. She pressed it into the wooden frame till the latch clicked free. Carefully, they slid out, closing the door behind them. The corridor outside was dim, torches burning low. The statues of gods and heroes loomed like silent watchers. Callista's breath misted in the chill, and every sound seemed to scrape against the stone walls. Her heartbeat, Lyra's whisper, the far-off drip of water. "Don't look back," Lyra murmured. They moved past the known paths, deeper into the temple's belly. Callista trembled as she gazed at murals painted along the walls, images of Apollo slaying serpents, young maidens offering him laurel crowns, priests bowing with solemn faces. By torchlight, the painted eyes seemed alive, almost condemning. At last, Lyra stopped before what looked like an unremarkable wall at the base of a stairwell. She pressed her palm against a stone block, shoved, and miraculously it shifted. A narrow gap appeared. Cold air, ancient and damp, breathed out like the sigh of something long buried. Callista's legs refused to move at first, but Lyra grabbed her hand and pulled her forward. Together, they squeezed into a winding passage lit only by their stolen torch. The walls were close, dripping with moisture. Somewhere below, a faint rumble of underground springs echoed. Delphi, Callista remembered, sat on cracks in the earth. People said vapors rose from the ground to let Apollo speak. Now, those same cracks seemed to whisper with menace. Finally, the passage opened into a wider space. And that's when Callista froze. Before her stretched a low chamber, chiseled from the rock. 4 stone pillars held the crooked ceiling in place. Along the walls, small alcoves were carved. And within some of them, she saw figures. Human figures, girls, pale in the torchlight, lying limply, some curled like children, some sprawled lifelessly. Their white robes were stained, their hair tangled. Their faces, Callista's pulse hammered, some were slack with emptiness, others frozen in silent terror. Callista's body shook. She dropped the torch, nearly crying out, "By the gods!" Lyra snatched the torch up quickly, her jaw tight. "Now you see. What happened to them?" Callista whispered, her voice breaking. "They were chosen," Lyra said bitterly. "Chosen to serve the priests, chosen to speak for the god." She spat the last words. "They talk of sacred rites and holy service. But look at them. They are broken, used until they vanish. And nobody asks questions. Everyone wants to believe Apollo took them." Callista's knees buckled beneath her. She pressed her hand over her mouth, fighting not to scream. "Some were my friends," Lyra whispered, her voice cracking for the first time. "Terras Nikia, Eleni. They promised us glory. They gave us ruin." Callista clutched the cold stone, tears burning her eyes. Her whole body quaked. This was worse than anything she had imagined. She had thought the temple hid lies, maybe trickery, but not this. This was cruelty wearing the mask of holiness. Suddenly, a faint shuffling sound echoed through the chamber. Both girls whipped around. Far across the room, something stirred in the shadows. One of the lost wasn't still. She moved. Slowly, painfully. A frail figure sat up in the alcove, her ribs showing through torn robes, her eyes glassy and wide. Her voice came out strangled, broken but distinct. "Get out." Lyra stepped forward, lowering her torchlight. "Ifia?" she whispered hoarsely. "It's me, Lyra." The girl blinked slowly, as if peering from another world. Her cracked lips trembled. "They'll find you," she rasped. "You shouldn't." A sudden noise split the chamber. The scrape of stone behind them. The entrance, closing. Callista's chest went ice cold. They weren't alone. Torchlight flickered off the smooth surface of polished bronze armor. A priest's face loomed in the doorway, twisted in fury. More shadows shifted behind him. "You've seen what you should not have seen," he hissed. His voice was iron. "And now you will join them." Callista choked on her own breath. The chamber seemed to spin. Lyra grabbed her wrist, holding tight with a force that cut off circulation. "Run," Lyra whispered fiercely. But where? The walls pressed in like a tomb. The cries of the lost girls echoed all around, hollow, hopeless. And Callista realized with bone-deep certainty, if they didn't escape tonight, they would never leave Delphi alive. The torchlight glared in Callista's eyes as rough hands yanked her from the chamber. She stumbled, scraping her bare knees across the jagged stone floor. Lyra dragged beside her. Priests surrounded them, their robes swishing like vultures circling prey. "You dare!" One bellowed, face red with fury. His voice echoed through the temple halls. "You dare trespass where no girl should step!" Callista's chest heaved, her heartbeat pounding in her skull. She tried to speak, to beg, to explain, but her lips trembled too hard, and nothing came out. She stole a glance at Lyra. Despite the bruises already forming on her wrist where they had gripped her, Lyra's jaw was clenched. Her eyes did not lower, even as they twisted her arms behind her back. They were hauled into the main chamber. The vast temple loomed above them, columns rising like pillars of judgment. At the far end, the omphalos stone gleamed under the watchful eye of golden Apollo, candles dancing at his feet. Dozens of girls had been roused from sleep and gathered to watch. Their white chitons rustled as they whispered to one another in shivering voices. What happened? Why is Callista here? Why Lyra? Priest Damon, the one who had first escorted Callista from her village, stepped forward. His smile was gone, his eyes hard as marble. He raised his hands slowly, theatrically, so his voice would carry. "These two," he spat, "have brought shame-spying upon the sacred, doubting the god's will, seeking corruption where none exists. Apollo will not bless the impure." The word struck Callista's stomach like a stone. She wanted to scream that it wasn't true, that what they saw below was corruption, not questions. But her mind raced with Lyra's warning. The god doesn't whisper. The priests control everything. If she spoke, she knew she would be silenced forever. Two acolytes appeared, carrying bowls of water mixed with herbs. The sharp scent of rosemary and ash filled the room. Damon plucked a laurel branch from one bowl and flicked it across Lyra's face. She flinched but stood tall, her eyes burning. "Purify them," he commanded. The ritual began. Laurel branches struck against their skin, stinging. But it wasn't truly cleansing, it was punishment disguised as ritual. The priests chanted louder and louder, their voices rising above the cries of the girls. Pure hands, pure mouths, pure service to Apollo. The laurel snapped across Callista's bare arms, leaving thin red welts. She gasped, tears burning her eyes. The other temple girls winced, some turning away, others staring wide-eyed. Callista felt her shame swell hotter than the pain. This wasn't a ritual. This was humiliation on display for everyone. Finally, after what seemed endless, Damon raised his hand and the chanting cut short. His voice drooped low, vile. "This is your only warning." His eyes drilled into Callista, then slid toward Lyra. Another act of disobedience, another stumble from the god's path, and you will vanish as others have vanished before you. Apollo does not suffer impure lips. A shudder rippled through the gathered girls. Everyone knew what he meant. The lost girls. Callista's stomach knotted. Damon wanted her to believe it was Apollo who stole them into shadow, but now having seen below, she knew differently. Two guards released their arms roughly, shoving them back toward the dormitory. The doors slammed shut behind them. For a long time, silence hung heavy. Then one girl whispered sharply, "Lyra, why did you drag her into this? Do you want us all punished?" Another hissed, "We'll be next if you don't stop." Their voices sliced like knives. Lyra tried to respond, but they shouted over her. Fear had sharpened them, twisting their words into poison. Callista looked at Lyra, whose lip was split, her face bruised. She didn't flinch under their anger. Her chin tilted high, her eyes blazing still. But Callista could see the strain beneath Lyra's clenched fists, her trembling chest. When the others finally fell silent again, Lyra turned to Callista and pressed her forehead against hers. Quietly, so no one else could hear, she whispered, "Do you see now? They will break us with fear, or they will break us with silence. Either way, we disappear." Callista blinked through stinging eyes. Her entire body ached, but what hurt more was the truth in Lyra's voice. That night, while the others slept uneasily, Callista closed her eyes and tried to picture home, her mother's hands kneading bread, the sound of goats in the field. She could barely recall the warmth of it. Would she too vanish like the lost girls, until no one remembered her? She whispered into the darkness, not to Apollo, not to the priest's god, but to herself. "No, not me. I won't be one of them." Morning came heavy, like a storm pressing against the mountains. The other temple girls busied themselves with chores, sweeping dust, carrying jars of water, grinding barley into flour, but the air between them was thick, charged. Eyes darted toward Callista and Lyra, then quickly away. No one spoke to them. Not at first. Callista bent over her broom, dragging it across the marble floor, though her hands trembled so badly she couldn't sweep straight. With every stroke, she felt the stares prick her skin. Some faces were pale with fear, others twisted with suspicion. Finally, the silence snapped. "You're going to get us all killed," hissed Marine, a sharp-faced girl who always seemed to linger closest to the priests. She slammed her clay pot down so hard it cracked. "You think you're brave, sneaking where you don't belong, but you're dragging all of us into punishment." Several girls gasped, others nodded quickly, eager not to be associated with Callista or Lyra. Lyra straightened from her sweeping. Her jaw was still bruised from the laurel, a dark shadow across her cheek. But her voice came calm, steady. "I went. Callista came only because I asked her. Place your blame where it belongs." Callista's heart skipped. Lyra was protecting her, even after everything. But Marine's eyes narrowed. "You think the priests won't remember her face too? You think purity matters now, after you corrupted her?" A rumble of agreement came from the others. Fear made them cruel. Callista could hear it trembling beneath their words. Fear had slipped into their bones like frost. Callista stepped back, her voice breaking. I didn't mean to," Marine cut her off. "You chose to follow her. Don't pretend otherwise. If the god strikes us down, it will be because of both of you." The girls murmured agreement again, little whispers like daggers. Callista felt her chest cave. Shame burned her from the inside. She remembered the crying below, the hollow voices of the lost girls. Were those girls once accused like this? Did the others blame them too? But then, from the far corner of the dormitory, a small voice rose. "Leave her alone." The girls froze. It was little Parthenis, barely 13, with large brown eyes that shone nervously. She wrapped thin arms around herself, but she didn't lower her gaze. "Callista didn't choose to come here. None of us did. They dragged us all here. How can you say it's her fault?" The room fell silent. Myrene flushed with anger, her nostrils flaring. "And you'd risk being punished too, child?" She spat back. "You'll disappear along with them if you don't hold your tongue." Parthenis quivered, but stood firm. "Then maybe disappearance is better than living forever in silence." The words hit like a thrown stone, splitting the room. Some girls looked away, lips pressed tight, as if ashamed. Others shook their heads fiercely. Callista felt her throat catch. Parthenis's courage was staggering in such a small body. Lyra smirked faintly. "Seems wisdom comes in all ages," she murmured, eyes gleaming at the little girl. The tension, however, only deepened. From that day onward, the chamber filled with whispered sides, those like Parthenis, who began to linger quietly by Lyra and Callista, eyes wide with half-formed hope. and those like Myrene, who crossed their arms, whispered to the priests whenever they thought no one was watching, and glared at anyone who looked differently than commanded. It was a dangerous split, and Callista felt crushed between them, a fragile reed bent in a storm of voices. That night, while the others drifted into restless sleep, Callista curled onto her mat, clinging to the faint glow of the oil lamp. Lyra sat beside her, sharpening the tiny dagger she still managed to hide. "You're too soft," Lyra said softly, not unkindly. "The others smell your fear. If you keep showing it, they'll tear you apart before the priests even lift a hand." Callista hugged her knees. "I don't want to fight them. We should be together." Lyra's eyes softened, just for a heartbeat. Then her jaw hardened again. "Together isn't possible in this place," she said. "Here, you survive by fighting. Or you don't survive at all." Callista buried her face into her knees, but Lyra's words clawed into her ears. And outside, beyond the thin dormitory walls, the temple continued its hum, the endless chant of priests, the ring of bronze at the training yard. The footsteps of worshippers come to hear the voice of a god who may never have spoken at all. Somewhere within those cold walls, Callista knew another girl wept in the shadows, unheard. She closed her eyes, and for the first time, the spark of something new crept into her chest. Not just fear, not just shame. Something else, anger. The morning sun glinted off Delphi's marble steps, blinding Callista as she climbed with the other girls. The entire religious court seemed alive to day priests bustling, incense curling in clouds, offerings of honey cakes and laurel piled at every corner. A royal procession had arrived, filling the temple with the hum of expectation. Whispers spread among the girls. "The oracle will speak today." Callista's skin prickled. She had heard the muffled chants, the cries from behind the golden doors, but she had never been allowed near the oracle chamber itself. Today, that changed. Priest Damon snapped his fingers at the dormitory girls. "Attend the Pythia. Keep her garments pure. Hold the laurel crown steady." It was an honor at least, that's what the others murmured. But Callista's gut told her otherwise. She felt Lyra's steady gaze burning into her as they carried baskets of laurel, their sandaled feet pattering softly along polished stone. They passed through the great bronze doors into the Adyton, the most sacred part of the temple. At once, Callista's breath caught. The chamber was dim, the air choking with smoky sweetness. The floors sloped slightly toward the center, where a jagged crack split the rock. Steam or perhaps gas curled up from its depths. The hissing sounded like a living thing. Above it sat the Pythia, cloaked in flowing robes of white and gold. Laurel leaves crowned her head. Her eyes were already half closed, her cheeks flushed. A bronze tripod supported her as she swayed. Her lips murmured nonsense syllables, rising and falling like a song Callista couldn't quite catch. Priests stood around her, chanting in rhythm. The people crowded at the entrance pressed forward, clutching their sacrifices anxiously. A foreign king from Asia Minor stepped forward, bowing low, eyes bright with desperation. "O shining Apollo," he cried, "tell me, shall my army march to conquer the West? Shall I succeed?" The crowd hushed. The fumes rose. The Pythia's body quivered, her head snapping back. Then, in a voice that seemed both hers and not hers, she shrieked, "Flames! Flames devour the laurel grove. The mountain burns, and the strong shall be struck down in fire." Her words cracked through the chamber like lightning. The people gasped. Some fell to their knees. Others murmured in awe, "The god speaks. Apollo warns us." But Callista froze where she stood, because beneath the oracle's scream, she heard something else. A sob, a human sob, muffled but unmistakable. The Pythia's eyes rolled wildly, her arms flailing as if she were fighting something unseen. Callista's chest tightened. That wasn't the voice of a god. That was the voice of a woman trapped in her own body. The priest stepped forward quickly, covering the cracks with smoke and chanting louder to drown her cries. One bent low to the king. Apollo warns of disaster should ambition rise too soon. Delay your march or burn in ruin. The king bowed deeply, trembling, as if salvation had touched him. The crowd roared its relief. Only Callista remained stone still, heart thudding. She had seen it, the tears leaking down the Pythia's cheeks, the panic in her muffled cries disguised as prophecy. Apollo had not spoken. No god had spoken. This was flesh and blood, twisted into a tool. Lyra's hand brushed hers, softly, secretly. Her whisper was warm against Callista's ear. "Do you understand now?" Callista's throat tightened. She wanted to say yes, but the words wouldn't come. They carried the laurel back out when the ritual ended, the people still praising Apollo's voice. Outside, sunlight seared their eyes, snapping the spell of smoke and shadow. But in Callista's mind, the voice remained, flames. Flames devour the laurel grove. That night, in the dormitory, Callista turned the words over and over. What if it wasn't just a cry for help? What if it was a warning? Or a chance? If fire came, perhaps fire was not destruction. Perhaps it was freedom. She lay awake long after the others slept, her chest tight with a dangerous, thrilling thought. Maybe the oracle's words weren't Apollo's. Maybe they didn't come from the priests. Maybe they had come from the Pythia herself. And maybe, just maybe, the Pythia was telling the girls what to do. The temple bells rang before dawn, echoing down the mountain slopes. Callista had never heard this sound before, not the usual dry clangs of bronze, but a cascade of chimes, bright and endless, filling the air with a strange, urgent joy. The festival has begun. By mid-morning, Delphi transformed. The quiet marble courtyards where the girls swept and whispered were now bursting with people. Merchants shouted over piles of fruit, laurel wreaths, and amulets carved from olive wood. Jugglers and flute players filled the streets. Parchment poets shouted their verses to passers-by. Soldiers in polished armor strutted proudly, their helmets flashing beneath the sun. "It's like the whole world is here," Callista murmured, trying to keep pace with the other girls as they wound through the crowd, carrying baskets of bread to lay at Apollo's altar. Lyra gave a dry laugh. The whole world comes to beg prophecies. What better time to hide wolves among the sheep? Callista glanced sidelong at her. "What are you saying?" Lyra's lips barely moved as she spoke. That if ever there were a chance to move unseen, to escape, this is it. Look around. The priests can't watch everything when the whole of Greece is crawling over the temple. Callista's heart thumped wildly. The thought was terrifying and thrilling all at once. She looked around at the chaos, noblemen from Athens, rough sailors from the islands, dancers whirling ribbons dyed crimson, lines of athletes greased in oil preparing to run the stadium track. Yes, if ever there was a time for shadows to slip through unnoticed, it was now. But even as she clung to Lyra's words, she felt a shiver. Someone behind them was listening. Marine, the sharp-faced girl's eyes gleamed as she balanced a tray of flatbread. She had drifted closer, her lips pressed in what almost looked like a smile, but it was too tight, too smug. Callista turned quickly aside, forcing her shoulders to relax, but her stomach sank. That afternoon, the girls were allowed to watch the games from the temple's marble steps. The Pythian games were unlike anything Callista had ever imagined. First came the race around the stadium, the athletes barefooted, their bronzed bodies gleaming as they tore through the dust. The crowd roared as the runners sprinted neck and neck. One stumbled, fell, and was trampled by another, the audience gasping, then cheering louder as the victor crossed the finish. Then chits of music floated from the amphitheater, where poets and singers performed hymns to Apollo. The crowd hushed, drawn to the sweetness of the lyre, the lilting rise of human voices. For a moment, Callista felt her fear fade. Music filled her heart like warm light. But the peace didn't last. Lyra leaned closer in the midst of the applause. "Tonight," she whispered, "when night falls and the visitors fill the taverns, that's when we go." "Go?" Callista's throat tightened. "Where could we even—" "Away from here," Lyra cut in, eyes blazing. "Does it matter where? As long as it's not these walls?" Callista swallowed hard, glancing at Parthenis a few steps away. The younger girl stole anxious glances toward them, her small hands clutching her robe. Callista could tell she wanted to come too. But escape meant risk. Even death. Was Parthenis too young to run? Too fragile? Callista's heart twisted. As evening fell, fires lit the mountain's terraces, little flames flickering like stars mirrored on earth. Drums pounded in rhythm with feet stomping and dancers flying across torchlit courtyards. Wine flowed, laughter shook the walls. Still within the temple, silence stretched. The girls huddled in their chamber, the heavy stone pressing down. Lyra moved like a storm-coiled spring, shifting restlessly, checking her hidden dagger again and again. Callista's hands sweated as she tied her sash tighter. Parthenis sat close to her, wide eyes bright with the nervousness of a child trying to be brave. Then click. The door creaked open. Myrrine stood in the frame, her face smooth as marble. She scanned the girls, her gaze landing on Lyra. "You won't get far," Myrrine said simply. Lyra's head snapped up. "What? You think I don't hear you whispering? You think you're clever?" Myrrine sneered. "I should tell Damon right now." The room tensed. Parthenis gasped softly. Even the other girls, who had been pretending to sleep, throbbed awake with sudden terror. Lyra stepped forward, her knife hidden in her sleeve. Her voice was low, dangerous. "If you speak a word, you'll regret it." But Myrrine only smirked wider. "I don't need to speak. The priests already know more than you think." She tilted her head, her braids sliding over her shoulder. "You're walking straight into their hands." And then she was gone. The door swung shut behind her, leaving silence so weighted it hurt to breathe. Callista looked at Lyra. For the first time, fear had cracked through her fiery mask. It wasn't the guards. It wasn't the priests. It was betrayal. One of their own had already poisoned their path. The night was louder than thunder. From the temple's upper windows, Callista could see flames from festival torches dancing across the valley. Songs and laughter shattered the air. The Festival of Laurel had reached its wildest hour, wine flowing, bodies swaying, drums hammering like a heartbeat, thrumming through the mountainside. But inside the temple, the air was suffocating. Priest Damon summoned all the girls to the great chamber. His eyes gleamed with something sharper than zeal, triumph. Myrrine stood beside him, chin raised, her mouth curved in a faint, satisfied smile. Lyra stiffened at Callista's side. Her hand twitched toward the dagger concealed within her robe. Callista leaned close, whispering, "Don't. They've set the trap," Lyra hissed back. "Can't you feel it?" The chamber was lit with dozens of braziers, the gold tips of flames licking upward. The priests had dressed the room for a special rite. Apollo's statue towered over them, torchlight reflections flickering across its unmoving marble face. "You are blessed tonight," Damon declared. His voice carried like a whip. "To serve Apollo in his fire. To burn away impurity." The words slithered across the stone, wrong in every way. The girls shifted uneasily. One clutched at her robe, another bit down on her lip until it bled. Myrrine's eyes flitted toward Callista and Lyra, then away, too quickly. Callista clenched her fists. She told them. She handed us over. Several priests unrolled scrolls and began chanting. Damon lifted a shallow bronze bowl and poured thick oil into the braziers. The flames roared higher, heat licking the walls, smoke pressing into the room until Callista's lungs ached. "This night," Damon said, "the oracle has spoken of fire. And fire will come to burn away the disobedient." His eyes slid like knives toward Lyra. A knot of dread snapped in Callista's stomach. The prophecy, the Pythia's tear-soaked scream, was being twisted, forged into their punishment. Two priests stepped forward, grabbing Lyra by her arms. "No!" Callista cried, rushing forward before she could stop herself. "She hasn't." A hand slammed across her mouth. She was shoved back, held fast. Lyra did not cry out. Her jaw tightened, her wrists strained, but her voice thundered through the chamber. "You twist the gods' words for your own gain. You are the impurity." Damon's lips thinned. "Blasphemy." His hand rose, signaling the acolytes at the braziers. The flames swelled higher. Oil splattered, sparks skittering across the floor. The heat beat at Callista's face until her skin prickled and sweat blinded her eyes. And then chaos. A brazier tipped, spilling fire across a fallen robe. The cloth ignited instantly, flames leaping from one banner to another. Within heartbeats, the chamber was ablaze. Screams cracked the chant apart. Girls scattered, stumbling against stone. "My gods!" One priest roared, trying to douse the flames with water. But the oil-fed fire spread too quickly, eating cloth and wood, curling upward like a beast unchained. Callista ripped free of her captor's grip as smoke poured into her throat. She staggered toward Lyra, who had driven an elbow into a priest's ribs, knocking him sprawling. "Run!" Lyra rasped, seizing Callista's wrist. "This is our fire. Our chance." They shoved past priests who coughed and flailed, their robes catching sparks. Marble cracked under the heat. Apollo's statue loomed above, its face glowing orange, as if a silent burning witness to the madness. The temple itself seemed to shriek. Parthenis appeared from the smoke, her small form coughing violently. Callista pulled her close without thought. "With us, now!" The three fled down the hallway, fire at their backs. Behind them, screams rose, priests shouting orders, girls crying, the bronze bowl clanging to the stone floor. Shadows stumbled in every direction. Myrine's voice pierced the chaos, desperate now. "Wait! Save me!" But when Callista turned, flames had cut the chamber in two. Myrine's thin figure blurred in the smoke, swallowed. Lyra yanked her forward. "Don't!" She snapped. "We can't save traitors." The corridors twisted like a nightmare. Smoke followed them, choking, blinding. Callista stumbled over a fallen column, clutching Parthenis desperately. Lyra dragged them onward, her jaw set, determination blazing in her eyes fiercer than the fire itself. They burst through a side passage into the night. Cool air slammed Callista's face like water. She fell to her knees, gulping breath after breath as her lungs burned. Behind them, the temple roared. Fire licked up into the black sky, orange against the mountain stars. The cries of men and women echoed down into the valley. The prophecy had come true. Flames devour the laurel grove. But not as the priests expected. It was not Apollo's punishment. It was rebellion wrapped in smoke and screams. Lyra straightened, her shoulders heaving, eyes locked on the inferno behind them. "Delphi will never be the same," she whispered, voice raw but proud. Callista looked at the flames, then at Lyra, then at Parthenis trembling in her arms. Relief, horror, triumph, they all warred within her chest at once. Tonight the temple had become a tomb for lies. But would anyone believe the truth? The night air was sharp and thin on the mountainside. Callista's chest burned as she stumbled through rocky paths, Parthenis clinging to her hand like a frightened shadow. Behind them, Delphi blazed on the slopes, flames curling skyward, smoke blackening the stars. Bells rang wildly. Shouts echoed down the valley. Lyra didn't stop running until they reached a cypress grove on the lower ridge. There, with knees buckling, she finally slowed, dropping onto the grass. Her hair, usually tight in braids, had come loose in tangled curls, her face streaked with soot. For long moments, the three girls said nothing. Only the mountain spoke, the crackling roar of fire above, the hiss of wind, the faint sobs spilling from Parthenis as Callista pulled her close. "We're alive," Callista whispered at last, her voice hoarse. She said it like a prayer, though no gods were listening. Lyra gave a low, bitter laugh. "Alive, yes. But for how long?" She gestured behind them to the glare of fire. "Do you think the priests will let us walk away now? They'll call us blasphemers. They'll say we brought the flames." Callista swallowed hard. She knew Lyra was right. Lies were always easier to believe than truth. People wanted gods and villains, not a world where priests twisted prophecies and girls paid the price. Parthenis lifted her tear-streaked face. Will we be remembered?" she asked softly. The question pierced Callista. Would they? Or would their names vanish into the same silence that swallowed the girls beneath the temple, leaving behind nothing but whispers no one dared speak aloud? Lyra reached over and squeezed Parthenis's soot-stained fingers. "Maybe not by name," she said simply. "But stories have a way of lingering. And sometimes stories matter more than names." Callista's mind filled with the Pythia, the oracle, with tears streaking her face, crying of flames, warnings twisted into lies. Maybe this was the meaning, not Apollo's punishment, not holy justice, but the fire of truth breaking loose. Maybe the Pythia's scream had been for them. She stood slowly, legs trembling but steadying with every breath. "Then our story won't die," Callista said. Her voice was firmer than she expected, louder than the fear coiling inside. "We'll tell it ourselves. And even if they kill us, even if we disappear, the story will stay." Lyra looked at her long and hard, then nodded slowly. A faint smile curled her bruised lip. "That's it. That's how we beat them. Survive or not, they'll never bury what really happened here." From far above, the temple roof sagged. With a thunderous crack, part of the marble gave way, collapsing into sparks. The blaze reflected in their eyes, brighter than stars. It would be easy to say they vanished into that fire. And maybe some would tell the tale that way, that the disobedient girls were consumed by Apollo's wrath. Others, perhaps braver, might whisper that the girls lit the fire themselves, rebels against a cruel temple. And in time, the truth and the lies would knot together into legend, the Lost Girls of Delphi. Years later, travelers passing through the ruins of the temple would still hear the stories. Old women at fountains told them to curious children. They say some of the temple maidens defied the priests, that they uncovered secrets no one dared speak of, secrets of the oracle's screams, secrets of girls who vanished beneath the stone. Others muttered in fear, "Blasphemers, cursed by Apollo, burned for their disobedience." But the whispers always circled back to three girls who fled the fire and were never seen again. Some swore they made it to Athens or beyond, living quiet lives under new names. Some believed they were hunted down, their bodies buried in secret graves. Others liked to think they became witches of the mountains, their laughter still carried on the winds of Parnassus. No one could prove which tale was true. But the silence of the lost chambers at Delphi, the echoes of muffled cries and fire's roar, carried the shadow of their truth. And Callista, though no one would write her name on stone, had left behind something more enduring than marble. She had left behind a flame,